Pleasure to reintroduce to you all Sarah Skochko. Sarah is one of our most popular speakers. She is currently a Unitarian Universalist ministerial candidate. Did I do that well? Having completed her studies. She also serves as like the outreach and communications and like a bunch of stuff at the Eugene UU, and she has agreed to come talk to us more than a few times this year, which we're pretty tickled about. Today she talks to us about hope, so please help me welcome Sarah.
That description of my duties at Eugene was like spot on. So a few of you have asked me this morning, what's next for me, right? My internship at Eugene is all done. They hired me back to help them with their outreach and engagement, and I preach there once or twice a month. And so I'm going to tell you a secret that I have not told the church at Eugene because I don't want them to fret, but you all can fret with me. In 39 days, okay, December 5th, I'm going to go to Boston, and I'll go before the Ministerial Fellowship Committee there. And I'll have an interview for an hour, and they'll decide yes or no, whether or not I'm a fellowshipped minister in good standing with the denomination. So that's a very big step. So 39 days, I'm counting down. And then after that, if they say yes, knock wood, fingers crossed, prayers submitted to the relevant authorities. The next step would be that I would be ordained. After I officially graduate from seminary in May sometime. And I bring you greetings from Eugene, as always, but also Grants Pass. I just preached there a few weeks ago and I let them know I'd be seeing you. They send their love. The fellowship there, they had been meeting in members' houses for a long time, and they just got their own space a few years ago. And they're very happy there, and they're doing well. And so they send their love to you. I let them know how all of you are doing, which is great as a fellowship. And in a few weeks, I'll be in Central Oregon. So if you have any greetings for the congregation in Bend, let me know. Yes, absolutely. And I wanted to talk to you today about hope, which seems to be in short supply in the year 2019, impeachment proceedings notwithstanding. We may have recouped just a shred, but it seems to be getting generally harder to find hope in a world that's on fire, even with the bright spots. And I had this realization about hope over the summer that I wanted to share with you. I was home in New Jersey, the other place with great saltwater taffy, by the way. I was visiting my mom and dad, and as we often do, we wound up staying up late watching movies. And as we went through their DVDs, deciding what to watch next, we came across The Sum of All Fears. Who's seen that? It's only a few. It's been a while. Yes, yes. And I'd never seen it before, and my mom could not believe it, and it went straight to the top of the docket. So we watched it right away. And just so you know, there will be spoilers. I'm going to tell you exactly what happens. So leave now if you don't want to spoil the surprise. But to be fair, you've had 18 years. And if you count the novel, 30. So it was based on a Tom Clancy novel. Maybe that rings some bells. And the movie had Ben Affleck, a very young Ben Affleck, an unspoiled Ben Affleck, and Morgan Freeman, who looks exactly the same any year, basically, and James Cromwell. You know that name? He was the farmer from Babe. Yeah. Yes, James Cromwell, playing the President of the United States. I know, it just seemed depressingly poignant to me. Given the current situation, I would love the farmer from Babe to be president of any country at this point. That's what we need, 2020, the farmer from Babe. That'll do, Mr. President, that'll do. So for the three of you who've seen it, you will not be surprised. The plot of The Sum of All Fears is that an Austrian billionaire, complete with the evil eyebrows and the evil goatee, which is a very special goatee, the evil billionaire with his snifter of cognac has decided to start World War III between Russia and the United States. And his plan, his overwrought, sinister plan, is to sneak a nuclear weapon into the United States and set it off and frame Russia, knowing that Americans will be so outraged they will retaliate with the full force of their armed forces, and the war will start. And it's just funny to me in the year 2019, because now countries just do this through Facebook. Like, you don't need to leave the bunker, you don't need to bring the weapon, it's so much easier now. But again, this was almost 20 years ago. And at what I thought was the climax of the movie, the bomb has actually made it to the United States. It's in a football stadium in Baltimore. Yes, during a big game, a playoff game. And the president is there, it's not far from Washington, and all of his staff, and Ben Affleck, the hero, is in a helicopter because he's discovered this. He knows where the bomb is. It's in the stadium. It's under the president. And he's racing in the helicopter to let them know so that they can evacuate the 20,000 innocent people from the stadium, defuse the bomb, save the day. And before he gets there, the bomb goes off and kills everyone. I know! I nearly fell off the couch. I have not been so surprised by a movie, not even including Fight Club. I can't think of a time. Sorry to ruin that one for you. I can't think of a time I was more surprised by a movie. I was so caught off guard, I didn't think it was real. And I turned to my mom in her rocking chair and I said, so this is just a dream sequence, right? So Ben Affleck's dreaming the bomb didn't really go off and he'll get there tomorrow. And my mom and dad said, no, shh, Baltimore's gone, just keep watching. Baltimore's gone? Keep watching? And then, just like my parents, everyone else in the movie carried on as if it was regrettable that Baltimore was gone, but at least Ben Affleck was fine. I'm telling you, I could not have been more shocked if the same thing had happened in the middle of the Lego movie. Highly recommended. The thing is, The Sum of All Fears had wrapped up its filming 3 months before the attacks on September 11th, 2001. 3 months, and at that point they couldn't just rescind the film, right? It was already slated to be distributed. So they wrapped up filming in that last sliver of time, that last shred of time in our modern era, when it was still thrilling, in fact, to spend 2 hours imagining what it would be like if the worst thing that could happen, happened. It's not fun anymore, is it? And I realized, once I learned that for the past 18 years in cinema, movies have been so hopeful. They've been so overwhelmingly hopeful that I could no longer imagine a movie where the hero didn't get there in time. That's why I was shocked. You know, you expect there to be a scene where all is lost, it looks like all is for naught, but inevitably, like 99 times out of 100, someone gets there to save the day against all odds. Even at the end of The Martian, spoiler alert here, they even went and picked up Ben Affleck's friend, Matt Damon. And that really seemed impossible, but they did it. And I think this trend of hopefulness in movies, in our art, in our entertainment, speaks to a collective longing that we have for reassurance. For reassurance that miracles can happen, that things can be okay. It might really be okay. And I think this longing has come to the surface in our cinema. And since watching the movie, I've become more and more intrigued about the role of hope in human life and culture, and whether or not it helps us all the time, whether or not it's realistic, collectively or individually as people, whether it's useful. Now, we all know that hope can have a sad dimension, like when we hold out hope for something that's not going to happen. And children do this all the time because we let them, and because they can't help themselves. We're born hopeful. A child will spend their entire childhood hoping a missing parent will come back. Any day now, someday. But we do that as adults too, often in those situations when we have become children again. Hoping a partner will change their behavior, for example. Hoping that an elderly relative or parent will come home from the hospital and really turn a corner this time, despite their ever-advancing years. Or hoping that we ourselves were really going to stay clean this time. We're going to clean up our act. Surely. And I would say that far from being misplaced or foolish, in those times, hope is one of the things that keeps us alive. When I served as a chaplain, I was asked at least once a week to pray for a miracle. Pray for a miracle. And you can imagine how alarming this was to me, a Unitarian Universalist. Agnostic-leaning, skeptical, a believer in science, a full proponent of double-blind, peer-reviewed studies, and a person who's definitely going to get a flu shot before the end of the season, now that it's October, to protect my beloved church members. Hint, hint. There were no miracles in my world. There were no miracles. The first time I was asked to pray for a miracle, I let the patient's family lead the prayer. That was the easy way out. I said, "You start," and they did. And then I went straight to my mentor, the chaplain Dow, and I said, "What do I do?" I didn't think I could sleep at night if I pretended in front of suffering people who had come to me for help that a miracle was totally possible. Of course, yeah, they'll get better. It felt like exploitation of their feelings to allow them that unbridled hope. In this case, the family's son had suffered a global anoxic brain injury. They had been without oxygen for too long, and he was a young man. And I asked Chaplain Dow, "So what do I do when someone asks me to pray for a miracle and I don't believe in miracles? What do I do when the chart says, 'will not recover'?" And he looked me dead in the eye and said, "You pray for a miracle." My mentor, Chaplain Dow, used to tell me that in one hand, we hold all of our fears about the worst that can happen. In one hand, we hold reality, the worst of our situation. And in the other hand, we hold our hope. Because if all you have is your hope in one hand, you're delusional and unprepared for what might happen to you. But if all you're holding on to is the worst of your situation, you'll succumb to despair. So we hold on to both. And the thing about prayer, something I didn't do much before I was a chaplain. The thing about prayer is that it's not often people get to admit out loud to themselves what it is they really want. That was often the moment people would burst into tears. When they would get to articulate, "I want them to get better, God, please make it happen." Or they would say out loud for the first time, "I just want the ending to come quickly." I never assumed what people would pray for, because I never knew. And then I saw a miracle. That same family, the first family who asked me to pray for a miracle, I was walking by their son's room one day, weeks after he'd been admitted to the hospital. And for weeks his movements had not been purposeful. His eyes had rolled back in his head. And that day I walked by, looked in, and he turned and made eye contact with me. and held it. I was so shaken I had to go sit down. And when I checked in with the family, they said, yes, he's been making eye contact. He's been turning towards the sound of our voices. The thing about a miracle is, we have a word for it because it happens. It's exceedingly rare, but it happens. This was the 1 in 50,000 chance. And suddenly I felt like a fool for not wanting to pray with them for this. They happen. And while they're rare, they're incredibly easy to imagine. They're incredibly easy to want. Of course we want a miracle. For every human situation, no matter how desperate, we can imagine Matt Damon making it there on time. We can imagine him getting rescued from Mars, or solving the problem. We can imagine that our teenager with a brain injury might look us in the eye someday. Is that so wrong? I don't think so. And while I would never encourage a family to expect that to happen, I refuse to discourage people from wanting them. It's so human. And of course, pretending that everything's going to be fine no matter what can be disturbing to those around us. And I'm not saying we should do that. Did you see the Lego movie? Anyone? Oh my gosh, it's so cute. They just came out with the Lego Movie 2, it's twice as cute. And I think they're theological and metaphysical movies. You'll see if you watch it. But in the first Lego movie, there's this super catchy theme song, Everything is Awesome. Yeah. That's gonna be in your head all day now. Everything is awesome. And a lot of people hate that song. And part of the joke of why so many people hate Everything is Awesome, that's the entire song. Part of the joke hinges on the fact that it's super annoying to pretend everything is awesome when it's clearly not. Clearly not. And so when the Lego Movie 2 came out just earlier this year, it featured a similar song called Everything's Not Awesome. And to my ministerial delight, the lyrics go, everything's not awesome. Things can't be awesome all of the time. It's an unrealistic expectation. They really rhymed that. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't try. Yes. Viktor Frankl wrote about this in his memoir about life in the concentration camps of World War II. He said that while many people lost hope completely and it was saddening, he wrote, quote, "It was the incorrigible optimists who were the worst companions." Can you imagine? When everything was actually awful everywhere in a way that you could not ignore, nobody wanted to share a bunk with the main character from the Lego Movie. Like, it's fine, guys, this is all awesome. No, it's not. And yet, Frankl wrote, the religious interest of the prisoners, as soon as it developed, was the most sincere imaginable. Their religious interest. He wrote, the depth and vigor of religious belief often surprised a new arrival to the camps. Most impressive in this connection, he says, were improvised prayers or services in the corner of a hut, or in the darkness of the locked cattle truck, when we were being brought back from a distant work site, tired, hungry, and frozen in our ragged clothing. Isn't every act of worship an act of hope? And isn't that hope something deeper and more real than just relentless optimism for its own sake? We don't have to pretend that everything's going to work out fine to come to church, to say out loud in front of others, please God, I want the impossible, just this time, please. I think of another story from World War II, possibly apocryphal, of a father and son who were given a meager ration of margarine along with their piece of daily bread. Before they could eat, the father supposedly reached down and plucked a thread from his already threadbare pants. The son said, "Dad, what are you doing?" And he put the thread in the margarine and said, "Son, without food, it could be weeks or months until we die. But without hope, we've died already." And then they lit their tiny lamp and prayed. Cultivating our own hope is a way of engaging with our vulnerabilities. And we're all vulnerable. Everyone in this room is mortal. It's a way of engaging with our desires as finite, fallible creatures, as humans. And so, it's not surprising that hope is central to religion. We're hoping creatures at our core. We hope, even if we don't know what the outcomes will be. It's one of the defining features of hope, isn't it? We don't know. We just wish. So right now, there are a good number of Unitarian Universalists around the country who are upset that our denomination is focusing on anti-racism work. And I think I've mentioned this to you before. But last week in Eugene, I preached about this directly, and it has gone Unitarian viral. Yes, so the sermon now has over 2,000 views on YouTube in less than a week. And I've been bombarded with messages of thanks for lifting this up and naming it directly. And I've also been less bombarded, but still contacted with some vicious messages of hate. One, and I'm fine with this. I was a bartender for 10 years. I am not bothered until people start throwing beer bottles. And one of the messages in all caps, "I want to get cross-stitched." I pity the congregation that gets saddled with her. And I'm going to hang it on the wall. In my first settlement. And so this small contingent of people is furious because, first of all, they deny that Unitarian Universalists could ever do anything racist. Not possible. And they think all this emphasis on anti-racism, all this emphasis on disability rights and transgender rights, all that is not necessary. It's just a distraction that's dividing us. This was never a problem before, when we weren't paying attention to it. This was never a problem before, when nobody talked about it because we didn't let them. Yeah. And although I disagree with that small contingent, I see the hopefulness in their denial. There's an element of hope there. The hope that it can't be true. Not our religion. Not the Unitarians. We can't really be like that. Our faith movement can't have problems. We're better than that. We mean so well. We're the good guys here. We marched in Selma. We fought for gay marriage. We could never, ever have problems like that. And I realize it must be so disheartening to hear your religion, something you hold so dear, that you may have worked for your whole life, that may have saved your life, to hear it criticized from within, to see the fractures revealed, when it seems like they might just as well have been left alone. And at the same time, I have a hope, a parallel hope, that we can do better, that we can be self-aware, look at the ways in which we as a denomination are falling short, and live up to our values, that we can make this religious movement more inclusive and accessible. You're doing it here by being on the first floor. This is an accessible church. And do you know how many churches in New England have steps to get in? All are welcome as long as you can walk. Oh. And climb stairs. Yeah. We can do better. We can make this religion more inclusive and accessible, not just to disabled people, but to transgender people, who by and large, outside of Oregon and even some within Oregon, report that they do not feel comfortable in our loving, inclusive churches. And so what are we to say to them? No, you're wrong about your own experience. We're actually inclusive, you just missed it. How arrogant. How hopeful. In all the wrong ways. Now, my desire for anti-racist work, I think, isn't defeatist, and I don't think it's divisive. I think it's hopeful. Hopefully in the right ways. And I don't think it'll take a miracle. We're not trying to get Matt Damon off of Mars. We're trying to build ramps. This isn't mission control. We can do this if we have some humility, if we're willing to admit where we need to work. And I'll say that one of the things that gives me the most hope is my fellow humans, first and foremost the Unitarian Universalists and their big hearts. But generally, any time I see people doing the right thing, it brings me hope. The global climate strike, for one thing. I'm reminded that Frederick Douglass said that power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has and it never will. And young people the world over are demanding. I want you to know that there is not just one Ben Affleck character to save the day. There are billions. And some of the time, it'll be you. The outcome is uncertain for so much of what we care about. But hope doesn't hinge on an outcome. I'm reminded, lastly, in closing, of the story of Pandora's box from ancient Greek mythology. Prometheus, a human, stole fire from the Greek gods, from Zeus, the same way we pulled oil out of the ground to industrialize our planet. And in return, Zeus created all the evils of the world and gave them to humans wrapped as a gift. It looks like a gift. And I think of what we've done as industrialized people. The shiny plastics we've created and squandered. The jet fuel we've burned in the name of progress, the ecosystems destroyed to advance civilization. It looks like a gift, always. But once that box was opened, it unleashed so many harmful spirits that in the myth began to hunt down humans, to torture them. Disease, sickness, greed and hatred, sorrow, revenge, anger and despair. But the part of the myth that often gets forgotten is that when all the evils had flown out of the box, out of the control of humans where we could never recapture them and get them under control, one spirit remained behind, waiting to be picked up if anyone would dare come close to the box. And at the bottom of the container, where nothing else was left, was hope. Thank you.